We are live. Hopefully you can hear me. I normally test this on my phone, but I've just looked around and I cannot find my phone anywhere. So if you can hear me, do let me know in the comment section. And what a fantastic guest we have got lined up for tonight's show. A fellow British hypnotist and a very successful one at that. Just recently finished a awesome tour of UK theatres. And theatres is something that a lot of hypnotists aspire to book and fill, and this guy is doing it successfully here in the UK, which I believe is probably one of the hardest audiences out there at the moment. So please make him feel very welcome. Joris says God. I think you mean good, but I'll take it. So please put that emoji icon in the comment section. Make him feel very welcome. This is your chance to pick the brains of an expert stage hypnotist and show promoter. So please make him feel very welcome. The one and only Mr. Robert Temple. There he is. How are you, Rob?
I'm good, mate. How are you?
I'm all right, just about. Fair to meddling, as they say in Yorkshire. Yeah, doing good, doing good. I'd love to see that you're rocking the beard as well.
Getting there. This has taken 35 years to grow this, and it's still really patchy on the sides. But one day when I grow up, I want to be like you.
So. Oh, well, I started growing this and I was dead pleased about it. And now every time I take like a selfie for Instagram, there's like a filter on Instagram that seems to make all the white hairs in my beard stand out. And I'm like, I don't see these. I've hypnotized myself into not seeing them. And when I see the picture, I'm like, no, delete. So yeah, Roy Miller's here as well. So we got some great guys in the house. So first things first, I mean, how are you? You've just finished a tour. That must be exhausting and kind of, it must be a great feeling as well to kind of check that off the box.
Yeah, I've spread the tour out a little bit more this year than I had in the past. Previously, I'd done it was really back to back and really crammed in with very few nights off. This time, I realized I wanted to do similar number of gigs, but spread out over a slightly longer period of time. So I was only really doing Thursdays, Fridays, Saturdays, Sundays, a couple of Wednesdays here and there where I just had to fill a gig in. So that wasn't quite as tiring, but I suppose even just driving home, because you've got a couple of nights off, is tiring. So whilst I didn't drive myself around, it is still quite tiring. But yeah, I'm good. I'm really good.
Interesting question. Talking about dates, you say you have some kind of midweek and weekend dates. Which do you find is better?
Yeah, so generally speaking, definitely the weekends, with a couple of exceptions, and it goes to, and we can talk more about this, but it goes to prove that the power that some venues have to sell a show. Because like I did in the last week of the tour, I was on the Isle of Man on a Wednesday, and when they scheduled that in, I was kind of like, okay, I'll come and do it, but like I don't know what a Wednesday is going to be like, and it sold incredibly well. I mean, the seats were flying out, so that worked really, really well. But I think it's largely, no offense to anyone who might be listening in the Isle of Man, because there's not a lot to do. It's like there's a couple of theaters on the whole island, and then they put stuff on and people just seem to go to it. So like the thing before, the Louis Theroux was on the night before me, that was sold out. Nice. 2 days after me was Jack D, that was sold out. I was in the middle. We didn't sell out, but we sold really well. It wasn't far off. So nice. I think, and obviously they're very famous. I'm not famous. So like, I think they just put stuff on and it does just seem to sell there, which is cool.
Yeah.
So definitely going back.
Yeah, I mean, I've not. The last time I was at Isle of Man was for the TT at the Winter Gardens, and that was an interesting weekend.
Yeah, I can imagine. When people are lovely.
Yeah, when the TT's on, it's like the island is just full to the brim, and when it's not on, it's not full to the brim. But yeah, beautiful place. So where's your favorite? I like old theaters. I like the architecture about them. Which is your favorite? I mean, I know you can't have favorites, but which is your favorite?
That's the most beautiful building I've ever stood in my life. I think it's such an incredible theater. I think I also like the Tyne Theatre and Opera House, which is my local one. That's a stunning theater. And there's something about, there's like a romance of Weymouth Pavilion I do every year, which has got like this. It's a very different theater. It's much newer than them. It's a two-floored, very, very wide theater, as opposed to being like 4 tiers and quite narrow.
Yeah.
But similar capacity. And there's something about Weymouth Pavilion, because it's a seaside town. It's still got a touch of seaside about it, like Blackpool or Scarborough. Nice. And when you like wander up and down the stairs, there's photographs of everyone who's played there, and like everyone famous from decades and decades and decades of music halls being on there. So there's like a performance-y romance to that if you're into theatre.
Yeah, I did Batley Frontier just before it closed, and for me, because I'm a bit weird for stuff like that. For me to be like, this is the same stage that, you know, such and such has performed, so, and it's just like, it was amazing. And for me, like you said, there's a nostalgia about it.
Yeah.
But that was quickly taken away when you look at the blood stains on the dance floor and everything else. So, you know what I mean? But it was a great venue, and I was pleased I managed to perform at it before it went.
Yeah.
You talked about you kind of spacing the dates out. I mean, I saw the schedule when you did do it, where it was like, you know, show. That must have been exhausting.
It is, but it's also really fun, and it's interesting. When I first started doing it, there's a couple of people. There's a guy I hired a lot of the tech equipment from, and he came on the road with us for that first tour, Darren, and he tours like a 60s tribute band type show as well,
Yeah.
around theaters. And he was talking about the fact that what they do with that is they spread that out. So they'll probably do, you know, well, I mean, more dates than me, but not dramatically more than me, but they'll spread them out over the course of an entire year. So what they might do is just every Thursday, Friday, Saturday for an entire year, or every, you know, or, you know, not every Friday, but like most Fridays and Saturdays every weekend for a year or whatever. And I said, I don't think I want to do that, because he said it just relieves the cash flow. It relieves everything.
Yeah.
Like, it's just a good way to do it. And I thought, actually, because the cash flow of doing theatre shows is just horrendous.
Yeah.
And so I was, which again, we can talk about if you want, but I was not tempted to take that route. I actually really like doing tons of shows in one go and then taking a few months off and not really doing a lot, although that hasn't worked this time, because I'm now about to dive from Tuesday into like corporate Christmas stuff.
Yeah.
So that hasn't quite worked, but I'm taking the time off from doing the theatre show, which is more tiring and more draining and a bit more stressful than just doing a gig. Yeah, so I quite like the sort of like do them all in one go, and I find the momentum sort of helps to carry you through from one to the next. You come off stage one night, get in the car, because I'm only doing one night in every place typically. Come off stage, get in the car, go to the next one, stay overnight in a hotel, get up early the next morning, get in, set up, do it again. I kind of like the momentum and the very fast-paced learning of like little bits of routines that evolve and develop between one gig and the next, so that by the end of it, you've got like not a totally different show, but you've got a real evolution on the show that started. No offense to the people who saw the first one, but it wasn't as good as the last one.
Yeah. And especially if you do new material for your show, by the time you get to that towards the end of that show, that's getting really polished as well.
Yeah,
So,
there's some stuff you really find. There's just little bits of business or little slight tweaks to the suggestions make them take root slightly differently.
Yeah, I think it's one of the great things. I mean, as stage hypnotists, we always do this. Like, you know, there's certain routines that, you know, people always complain about. Like, someone's been doing this for 37 years or whatever it is, and it's like, yeah, but that same routine just becomes so different once it's been used so many times.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people miss the nuances, the little bits of stuff when it comes to suggestions. And being on the road like that really does that. Jeff Bennick's in the house as well. Jeff, hello, how are you? And guys, don't forget as well, if you have any questions whatsoever, anything, then do pop it into the comment section and we will try our best to answer it. What challenges, what surprised you over this tour compared to the last tour?
The theatre world's definitely not back to normal yet after the pandemic. Like, it was interesting going from place to place. In some of the places where we hadn't sold quite as well, I would like talk to the theatre staff and say like, how's stuff generally selling around here? And generally people would go, yeah, it's been really bad. So there is we're still recovering from the pandemic. If you look at the theatre industry generally, so that's been an interesting challenge, worth pushing through and worth pursuing. And you've just got to build audience confidence that, you know, shows are going to go ahead and stuff like that. So generally speaking, with a couple of exceptions. So like, I was about to go on stage the night that the news broke, that the day that the news broke that the Queen had died. We were just about to open the doors to our audience. And then obviously a few days or a couple of weeks after that, they had like a minute's silence on a Sunday. So we were like, right, we're just pulling that show. We'll have to stick it next year, because that's going to fall half an hour into the show. And like, it's just going to be some weird stuff that we want to observe, and we want to give the public the chance to, whether you're into that stuff or not, want to give the public the chance to be into it if they are. So there's a couple of things. So with a few exceptions, we were just like, the shows are going to go ahead. We're going to make them work. We're going to do the best job that we can, and build public confidence that shows are going ahead. So that's been an interesting challenge. Some places tickets were flying, other places are just a bit slower. But like I said, all of the ones where they're a little bit slower, I'd have a conversation with somebody and they'd say, yeah, more or less everything's been like this lately.
Yeah. I think people's confidence, I mean, you know, I don't do a lot of four-wall shows or a lot of ticketed shows, but those that I do, I'm seeing maybe 20, 30% less kind of bookings, and the time that people buy tickets now. Whereas it used to be people would buy well in advance and then you'd build up to it, and then that final 2 weeks you kind of get that surge. Now it's like it's that final week you stood and you're looking at it and you're going, is it on? Is there something broken? Why is it not working? How have you found it? Are people's ticket buying habits change when it comes to theatre shows?
Yeah, so that last minute ticket sales has been a real thing this year. There's an interesting thing too, where there was one show that where it hadn't sold very well. I'll just be blunt. The theatre holds about 900 people and we'd sold like 150 tickets or something like that. So I was going to go and do it. We had the conversation about moving it, and the theatre had said something which on asking other theatres a similar question later, I found out to be true across the board is a real trend, is that what used to happen back in the day is that if somebody was doing a theatre show and they had to move it to a new date, either because they had to go and film something for the television or because it wasn't selling that well or whatever, they'd push it back 6 months or whatever. They would obviously contact all the existing ticket holders and say, hey, you can have a refund if you can't make the new date, or we can just transfer your ticket over and it'll still be valid for the new date. Yeah. And 90% of people would just move their ticket to the new date. Apparently a new trend that's happening this year, or has happened this year, is that most people will go, oh, never mind, just give me my money back, and when we get nearer the time, I'll rebook. So that's a new trend that seems to be happening in theatre right now. And again, I think it's down to people's money's tight. Obviously, we're going into a cost of living crisis. Things are tight, things are tough, things are rough. So I think at the moment, given the chance to come and see a show in 6 months' time or 3 months' time versus be able to feed your kids this week, even if it's not that tight, people are opting to have the cash back for sure.
I think there's almost a Britishness to it. There was always to cancel a show, to cancel tickets, was always a thing that was never, it was difficult to be done, always never to be done. But then since COVID, it's so much easier now for people to cancel tickets, to ask for refunds, to move things around. And I think it's made it more acceptable for people to do that. So like I said, now that rather than supporting the artist, now they'll go on, I'll take the refund.
Yeah.
I think Martin Lewis said something at the beginning of the pandemic where it was like, yeah, get your money back and then you can renegotiate later with any bookings. And it's like, not the best way. But like you said, to then put on that show kind of after the pandemic as well, and then still soldier through with that, it does build that confidence. So you've got some great shows lined up for 2023. How's that looking at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's so early at this point. It's really hard to say. I think I haven't looked, but I would imagine if you go through any of those seating plans, you probably see that they don't look particularly busy yet. Most of the shows are in like April. So I'm doing a small sprint in April, which is mostly making up for the ones that we had to move this year because of the Queen and various other bits. And then I'm doing the proper tour back out in September. Same show again. I'm not writing a new show this time. For me, like there's a cost of creating and putting together a new show, both in terms of the fact that I pay some people who help me write it for ideas and stuff like that, comedy writers and that kind of thing, plus all the stuff to do with the branding and the trailer and all that stuff. And for me, I haven't had the money's worth out of that yet. So I'm going to run it out for another year and do a bunch of the same theaters who I've got a big audience with, and do a bunch of new ones I've never done before too. So I'm going to roll out the same one next year. But again, at this point, not really worried. We've got Christmas to get out of the way and a bunch of other stuff. So I anticipate people will be looking to do that stuff first. I found an interesting trend in people looking to book tickets as a present for other people too, which is interesting. So they'll buy them as Christmas presents, birthday presents for other people. One of the things I've done for the first time this year is to actually take a lot more of the marketing stuff and make it longer lasting. So for example, I've started building an email list of my own audience members. One of the things I found the hard way is that most theaters they either don't have their own email list, so their email list exists through whoever their ticket supplier is. So for example, just off the top of my head, a theatre that I play here in Newcastle, they use a ticketing service called Eventim, and Eventim actually hold the mailing list and the majority of the data, and the theatre aren't actually set up to be able to send email broadcasts out. Wow. So if they want to send an email out promoting my show, so let's imagine they wanted to send a broadcast about my show by email to everyone who's previously been to see my show in that theatre before, they have to pay Eventim to do that. And obviously there's a cost, they'll do that, and then they'll give me a recharge as well. There's Amber's an example. She's bought my tickets as a Christmas present before. So that was an interesting thing. So this year, for the first time ever, I've actually started doing my own stuff to bring our own email list in-house. So this year, just off the back of this year, I think I've got about 3,000 subscribers across the UK.
Nice.
Not a huge number, but like 3,000 people who are either have seen or are interested in coming to see my show. And so now they're all segmented by what part of the country they're in. So when I'm back in the Northeast, I can email them about that. When I'm down south, we can email them about those dates. That's all there is. There's only up north and down south, isn't there? But now I've got all the different cities segmented out. So
yeah. And for, you know, for guys watching stage hypnotists, you know, troopers that are on the road, you know, having that list is probably the most important thing you can have, because if you are working in an area, if you've got an area where you can say, listen, I'm here on this date, you know, especially when it comes to booking shows, the booker doesn't really care how entertaining a show is. A booker cares of how many bums are put on seats.
yeah.
And so if you've got your own database that you can put out there.
I never thought about it, but it's a really valid point. Yeah, in terms of leveraging that to help cliented gigs. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, exactly. It's all about bums on seats. So I must admit, I'm a big fan of mailing lists. They seem to have fallen out of fashion a bit with like social media marketing. But I think people are coming into that a bit more again now. Like you said, it's your list. It's not Facebook list. It's not Eventbrite's list. It's your list, which is and great for targeting for anything.
Yeah. So that's definitely been a big shift this year.
Yeah, yeah. So like you said, you're coming up to corporate Christmas party season, which we all love. I don't know if anywhere else in the world has like Black Eye Friday or Mad Friday. Mad Friday is a day that I refuse to work. Every year I get offers. Every year I say no. There's no point. But I do love the corporate Christmas party season. But yeah, it's good fun.
I've become very picky about which gigs I'll take for that. Interestingly, so there's a bunch of stuff. There's a bunch of inquiries that have come in where they've said, you want to come and do this corporate thing, and I'll really grill them for the details of who's going to be there now. So like on Tuesday, I'm in Lincolnshire doing a group of engineers. That's going to be fine. The sort of demographic is there'll be about 100 of them. They're all almost all under 35. They're having an awards thing. I'm on at like 6:30, finish at 8 o'clock, done. That's a perfect gig for me. Whereas I think a lot of people, obviously, just because they don't understand how hypnosis is and what it works, will try and stick you on in front of an audience who are just not going to enjoy it or want to take part because of their circumstances.
I did a medical pharmaceutical company, and that literally that should have been a magician. That's it, the CEO, that in his mind, that's what he had booked, and we talked about it with his PA, explained the show, and got there, and it was just like, you know, at the time you're like, why have I took this gig? And then when it comes time to buying Christmas presents, you're like, that's why.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I love the Christmas season when it comes time to buying presents. So yeah. But I think, like you said, you've got to be picky with shows. I think when guys are first starting out, you want the stage time. You want to do every gig you possibly can. And I think after years, when you've got a strong brand and you've got a fantastically strong brand, you've got to protect that brand as well. You don't want to be taking a gig for the sake of it and then that having a negative impact. So
yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I mean, how important is branding to you? I mean, you have one of the best websites when it comes to stage hypnosis, and your brand is consistent all the way through, which I'm a bit jealous about. But yeah, it's absolutely spot on. So yeah, you know, tell us the thought process behind the red.
Yeah, I mean, that was more or less the red hair initially was an accident, although in all seriousness, and this is genuinely true, I had an email from the PA of the MD of a corporate I'm doing this November, saying, and I'm going to read this because I screenshot it to send to some friends. It says, also, if it's not too intrusive, could you dye your hair blue, which is our corporate color? We did notice your lovely red colored hair when we zoomed. We had a Zoom call about the gig. We did notice your lovely red colored hair when we zoomed last time. So I replied saying, no, unfortunately, that is fixed. I'm happy to like customize the show a bit, but that's fixed.
Yeah.
So it was more or less an accident, really. But when I was about 18, I just dyed it red, and it just sort of stuck. I did it to sort of stand out and kind of just to be different and all the rest of it. And then now I'm 35 and I've still got it. Yeah, I think brand is really important, and it was something that I've always struggled with because I haven't got a really good eye for stuff. Like, I'm terrible. I hate having to like try and piece an outfit together, or if I was trying to like decorate a room and furnish it from scratch, like it's just not my strong point at all. I just want to ask somebody else to do it for me. Right? Yeah. I don't want to learn how to do it. I just want to get somebody else to do it. And so I got my branding done by a really, I mean, it cost a fortune, more than I was comfortable with. But I just wanted to have something that was going to stand out head and shoulders above what, truthfully, in the UK especially, is mostly homemade hypnotists' websites. And so I wanted to just go out there and see what it would do, and see what difference it would make in terms of abilities to attract the right clients and be able to put my fees up and all of that stuff. And it worked. I'm glad. Well, so I think it contributed anyway. It's hard to really pinpoint that stuff, but I think it definitely did contribute. And then I think on top of that, then, is to obviously brand every individual show that you do. So the tour that I've just done and we'll be doing again next year, which is Red Raw, that show is a sort of brand for years and years and years. Because I started doing theatre shows by accident. Originally, I only filmed a theatre show. I only did a theatre show. I hired a theatre, did the show, filled it up. And like by doing like voucher deals and Groupons and stuff, I was like, somehow we're going to fill this theatre. And I did. And then only to film it in order to create a show reel for other stuff. And it was only when I was in the theatre, and I've always loved theatre and I've always gone to theatres. And if I could, I would be in musical theatre and stuff like that. If I had that talent, that was what led to me to go, I wonder if there's a way I can make this work and become a theatre hypnotist. And so initially I just had some branding designed by a magician who's also a great graphic designer, and it looked good, and you've seen it. It's the red discs with the gold thing that I used for years and years and years. And the problem is I used that same sort of look and feel for like from 2014 or 2013 when I did the first gig until the show in 2019 was still the same poster and everything. And it got to the point where, certainly in the theaters I'd been to before, I think people become a bit blind to that. Like, oh, it's just the same thing. And so that's when I realized this year I needed to really cut through the noise and do something different. So went out, had new branding for the show design. So now I've got my sort of like my general branding, which is the one you've seen on the website. And then the show branding will need to be sort of different every time I roll out a new show. So that's an exciting new challenge every year, to just try and create something that's a bit different.
Yeah, I spoke to Australian hypnotist, Matt Hale, great hypnotist, and he was talking about his posters, how he always creates a new poster for each season as such. And it's that unconscious message that it lets people know that there's something different. It's a new show.
I think like the one thing I don't have now that I do need to get sorted, well, I say I need to get sorted. I'm not doing any of these gigs, so maybe I don't. But like, is if I got hired by a venue to just go and do a gig for them, and it's not my tour show, it's just them hiring me and putting on the show and selling the tickets. I don't have like a generic Robert Temple poster that they can like overprint their details and stuff on. But then I say I need one, I probably don't, because I'm not doing that. If venues want me to do a show, it's likely I'll either say no or I'll program it in as part of our tour instead.
Yeah, for me, it's, I've had show posters for years, and like you said, I had one that I loved that worked really well, and for the past 5 years, I'm like, I need to update that. But for most bookers now, they just want a good headshot, and they can create their own poster.
Yeah, exactly.
So that works. Yeah. Jeff Benning says, "What have you done to what did change in marketing your show after the pandemic?"
I think the bit I touched on before about starting to bring my own email subscribers into it was a really relevant thing. But also it's just interesting stuff. Like I realized, this is not exactly pandemic related, but it just happened to coincide with the pandemic, is I started to realize that in the UK, there are a raft of people, and this took me far too long to realize it. There are a huge number of people who just don't know what a hypnosis show is. Yeah. When I went and did Jack Mate's Happy Hour podcast, which has like 1 million downloads an episode, I realized from talking to them that they were quizzing me as obviously non-hypnotists interviewing a hypnotist, and they've never seen a hypnotist show either. And so they were like talking to me about what it is. And I realized from the sort of general feedback that we got on social media and the aftermath of that interview that most people have never seen a hypnotist and therefore don't know what it is. And most of the people who have seen one are people who can remember back to having seen Paul McKenna or Andrew Newton, or who, when they were like at the height of their UK theatre world. And you realize, God, it was such a long time ago. So I went to see Paul McKenna's, what I think was his last ever UK tour at Newcastle City Hall when I was, I think, 15 or 16. So I was just learning it. It was certainly before I'd started doing my show. So I'm sure if I Googled it, I could find out when that was. But yeah, so I saw that. And I think since then, nobody's ever really doing it. People obviously ask me questions about like, what do you think of Darren Brown and stuff like that? Because he's using more and more hypnosis in the show, especially this year. Yeah. No more spoilers than that if you haven't seen it. But I think that's an interesting challenge to overcome. And that came out in a conversation with a theatre manager of a little theatre in Northumberland who said, I think the challenge is there are loads of people who you would love to come and see your show who if you could get them through the door, would really enjoy it. Yeah. But they just don't know what it is. So what I'm starting to do now is quite a lot more education around what it is. So like I ran a contest to give away some tickets at every theatre, and we'd fuel that with Facebook ads. and we'd get loads of comments on the Facebook ads with people saying, oh, I've entered the competition. But you'd also get a lot that said, oh, I don't want to, you know, somebody would tag their friend, and then their friend would come and reply and say, oh, I don't want to be hypnotized. And like, there's just like quite a lot of misconceptions to overcome. It's not even disinformation. It's just stuff that like people have made assumptions that you go and see a hypnotist, you might get hypnotized, which is true, but it doesn't sound, it's not true in the way that it sounds like it's true. So there's just I think it's been about re-education this year and trying to get people's heads around what it actually is. So again, it's not pandemic related exactly, but the pandemic's given me a lot of time to like think and really dive into social media and have conversations and see what the sort of general opinion about hypnosis shows might be amongst the general public.
It's an interesting kind of fact as well. Like you said, most people haven't seen a hypnosis show. Most people, if they have it, it was years ago. And I think, especially in the UK, I think that's the issue that kind of jobbing, gigging stage hypnotists have. In the UK, there's a very small number of professional stage hypnotists, and that's no disrespect to guys that do 2 or 3 shows a year. But there's a big difference between guys that are doing it and guys that do it a little bit. But a lot of venues don't know the difference between that as well sometimes. And sometimes what happens is people have seen a stage hypnosis, or they've seen a hypnosis show in a venue, not a stage hypnosis show, and then kind of go, oh, saw one who was the world's fastest, quickest, biggest, tallest, funniest. He was the world's funniest, and it was shit. So we're not going to book one now. And so it was part of the thinking behind this kind of thing, was to kind of trying to help stage hypnotists, jobbing stage hypnotists as well, kind of up their game a little bit, because a lot of venues and a lot of people don't know the difference between, they see one bad hypnotist, they think all hypnosis shows are terrible. They see a bad singer, they go, oh, well, never mind, we'll still go to the same venue next week and see the next singer. So,
and the UK market is hard, like both from a point of view of being hired and also doing public shows like mine. I think I legitimately, and it's nothing to do with not wanting competition or anything, so I don't really see it like that. I genuinely put most new people off from trying to start up in the UK. It's just a really hard market. I know some folks from overseas who are looking to move to the UK as part of their life sort of choices, and like, how do I get set up as the UK? And I gave them all the advice and help that I possibly could, but I said, I don't think you're going to find it easier than you are where you are.
Yeah. It does seem like in the US and in Europe, I mean, in France at the moment, there's such a resurgence on kind of performance hypnosis. It's amazing. But the UK, it's a very, very challenging market. Joris says, do you send promo videos to clients?
No, so I do very little. So first of all, I do very little in the way of like outreach. I spend almost no time doing outreach. One thing I will say is that I definitely see a massive surge in gig inquiries just after or during the point of doing a tour. I think what happens is when you've got all the theaters sending, so the theaters do a certain amount of PR, so they'll like send press releases off to their like local what's on Newcastle or what's on Huddersfield or whatever. And then I do a bunch on top of that. And I think I don't understand it, but I think just being boosted in the search results for that stuff, I think generally does seem to create a lift in inquiries. So it's one thing. So I do very little in the way of like outreach marketing, because I'm not really bothered. If I didn't get booked to do any shows at all, I wouldn't really be too bothered. I'm not chasing it. I'm just taking the ones that I get. So I don't, but I guess I have the promo video on my website, and almost all the work comes through the website. Again, I think it's just a well-structured. I spent a lot of time in meetings with the branding agency who built the website. I spent a lot of time with them trying to figure out what's like the customer journey through a process of deciding to have a hypnotist, or even just thinking we might have a hypnotist, through going through my website, through figuring out what it is, through seeing a video. So I never do any like direct outreach stuff, but there is a promo video on the site.
Yeah. And a great promo video as well.
Thank you, mate. The site's trying to balance, and it's a hard act to juggle. It's trying to balance being a public persona that people book tickets to come and see, versus an act that's bookable for your event, if you like. That is a hard thing to straddle.
Yeah. I get that, and that's got to be a challenge, because you don't want your bookable show to dilute your stage show, if you know what I mean. And
I'm definitely largely pushing it as a ticketed thing where I'm on tour and you can come and see the show, but at the same time, I just don't want to put off the fact that people can hire me.
Yeah, absolutely. So yes, Fraser says, good evening, gentlemen. Fraser Penman. Have you just done a show, or he's just got a show coming up in Scotland? Let us know in the comment section details about that show, Fraser. It's always good to kind of share that. So, what's next for you? I know you're doing quite well on, again, TikTok, Instagram, YouTube.
Yeah. So I'm not very good at social media. I'm just starting to get my head around it now. I'm really good at email. I'm terrible at social. So I'm just starting to get my head around that stuff now. I'm doing a bunch more podcasts and that kind of thing, because that gave us a real surge into, I think, every single night of the Edinburgh Fringe and every single night on tour. Somebody came up to me and said, "Oh, I heard you on Jackmate, or I heard you on this one." So like the podcast thing's really pushed. So I'm really, really expanding into that right now. Rolling out the tour again next year. I'll be back at the Fringe again next year is the plan. I'm going to try. The plan is I'm going to try and do 2 shows a day at the Fringe next year, like a sort of family one on an afternoon and then a really adult one late at night. So I was doing one every day this time. I think I'm going to do, and I've really got my feet under the table there now. Like I get it. I understand how it works. I've figured out the system. So the plan is to do 2 a day next year, because that'll be good. And then back out on tour again, a little bit in April, and then primarily September, October, and November. I'm going to take a slightly bigger gap between the Fringe. This year I only had 3 days between the Fringe finishing and the first tour day, which was a mistake. So I'm going to give myself slightly longer next time. I'll probably take 10 days off.
How was the Fringe this year? This is the first year I've not been up to the Fringe. How was it kind of post-pandemic?
It definitely feels like it's gone back to normal. It hasn't from an economics point of view. I know the Fringe generally, people were reporting being about 20-25% down in terms of money. I was lucky. I finished about 25% up on the previous year, because I track it all like a madman in a spreadsheet. And I compare my numbers this year to not the pandemic one, because the pandemic one was understandably quiet, but to the 2019 Fringe. And I was about 20-25% up this year, which I was pleased with.
Nice.
Yeah, so it was incredible to be back at a Fringe that feels like what the Fringe is supposed to feel like.
Oh, Jeff Benning says, can you say what the Fringe is? The Edinburgh Fringe is probably the biggest comedy festival.
It's the biggest arts festival in the world. Yeah, it's like millions of people flock to Edinburgh, and there are thousands of shows on. Every space becomes a show, becomes a venue. So like churches and cafes. Like I did some little cabaret guest spots this year for to promote my show. So I go around and do like 10 minutes of stuff in different cabaret shows. And like one of them is literally, if you go into a burrito restaurant, there's a burrito restaurant on Northbridge called Burrito and Shake. And if you go into there and go downstairs, you've got the kitchen to the left, and then the bit of floor that's not the kitchen, they turn that into a venue. So like if there's a bit of space, it's turned into a venue and there's something on. So I do that. I did it in 2019. I've been going to the Fringe every year since I was a kid, because my dad used to work in Edinburgh. But then I did it in 2019, 2021, 2022, and again, hopefully back again next year if that all works out.
Awesome. It is an amazing festival. There was something I was going to ask them, I completely forgot. But Dylan says, hey guys, saw Rob, met him last year. Awesome show.
Thank you, mate.
Brilliant. And Amber says, booked already for the Fringe, this time for longer, and defo looking forward to the tour. Are you doing any little work in progress shows?
Yeah, so actually that's a new thing I did this year I've never done before, is this idea of like doing small work in progress gigs. So like little tiny venues that hold 50, 100 people. Just like this, well, I did the Comedy Club in Newcastle, which I've done before. That's a bit bigger. That holds about 300. But I did that, and then a couple of little venues that have got stages in them around the Northeast. That was a lot of fun, actually, just as a chance to like work in some new stuff.
Yeah,
I didn't leverage it as much as I could have done. I didn't work in as much new stuff as I could have done, which meant on the first day of the tour, there was still some stuff that felt really rusty to me and needed quite a lot more work. But I've figured that out now. So I'm definitely gonna do some more. I think I might do some, when I do the Fringe, I do the free Fringe, where the model is you come into the show totally for free and you just pay whatever you think it was worth on the way out. It's actually a financially more viable model for entertainers. But as long as you understand how that bit of game is played, I think I might do some work in progress gigs that have that model, but not at the Fringe. I think like to sort of, especially in the climate we're in now, I think there might be something to say.
I like that. Yeah,
I think there might be something to, again, in this climate, I think there might be something towards saying, like, just come for free, pay whatever you think it's worth on the way out, pay what you can afford. Because the goal of those gigs is not to make money. The goal of those gigs is cover costs and work in new material. Yeah,
and it's a great way of promoting an upcoming tour as well. Fraser Penman says, fantastic festival, have to come and see you there. Got a show next week in Glasgow, but forgot that tonight's all about Rob. But thank you for that, Grant.
That's very kind of you, but plug the show all you want. I don't mind.
That's what I was going to ask you. When you said you were going to do like a matinee show and an evening show, a family friendly and an adult show.
Yeah.
I mean, you are a outrageous hypnotist. You do a lot of the adult material. How does that work, going from the family friendly to the adult, and which one do you prefer to do?
What's quite interesting about it is, I mean, for the last couple of years, I mean, pandemic aside, I'm going to say the last couple of years, I've sort of reeled in some of the adult nature a bit. Again, I think the climate we've lived in, we live in a world where we live in a very woke world, don't we?
Yeah.
And I'm not a very woke person, so nothing offends me. I'm not offended by anything at all. You can make jokes, but I think comedy, you should be able to make jokes and do stuff about anything.
Yeah.
But lots of people have a pop at that very, very, very openly, and I can say this because it's on the internet, very openly. Andrew Newton likes to have a pop at me for doing the adult stuff that he doesn't think hypnotists should do. It's an opinion. I reeled in most.
Sorry to interrupt. Who does a gay Nazi gymnast routine?
Does he?
Yeah.
No. You've had him on here, haven't you?
No. I've sent him a message for him to come on, but he's not been on.
Oh well.
To quote him, if you think having a vagina on your chin somehow makes you unique, Grant, you're sadly mistaken.
Are you serious? Oh, he doesn't like you either then. Oh, that's all right then. Anyway.
Do you know what though? All that aside, I always say to people, and anyone that ever comes to me and says, "Oh, I want to learn stage hypnosis," or anything like that, I always say, go see Andrew Newton's show. One, he doesn't allow hypnotists in there, but I think he's a great performer. Forget the off stage stuff. I love his style of comedy, and I think he's an absolutely brilliant presenter of hypnosis, as you are as well.
Thanks. Yeah, so he always has a pop at me for that very openly and very publicly. But I think so I've sort of reeled it in a bit lately, but I was having a chat with a friend of mine, Stephen, who's a magician and he's like my social barometer. His sort of he's the person I ask if I'm not sure if something's okay, basically. And I was talking to him about it, and he said it's really interesting, and I never thought about this. So big kudos to my friend Stephen for pointing this out. But he basically said, you realize you can do anything that you want to on stage using hypnosis without causing offense or without causing a problem to anybody, and without ever coming under fire or under huge problems. All you have to do is, and I never thought about this. So I used to do the orgasm thing, the handshake orgasm thing.
Yeah.
And he said, all you have to do is change that routine around so that rather than saying sleep and then doing it, you just say, you basically introduce the routine while they're all still wide awake in between routines. And you say, look, blah, 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 hypnosis can do lots of things, orgasms, blah, blah, blah. Introduce it with some cleverly written thing I haven't written yet. And then basically say, if you would like to take part in this, just let me know now by raising your hand. And most people just will, because they're there on stage for a reason. They want to take part in this. And the ones who just don't will just say, no, it's not for me. And if you end up with one person or two people out of a line of 10 or 12 who want to do it, fine, you can still pull a routine out of that. And I thought, what an interesting idea. You can't possibly... I mean, having said that, when I used to do the orgasm thing a lot, nobody who was on stage ever complained to me about it. It was only ever offensive to the people who weren't on stage having it done to them. So, I mean, that probably says everything you need to know. I'm fed up with people being offended on other people's behalf. But that does solve the problem of people in the audience being worried that people are, for the welfare of people on stage, because you've given them the choice to not do it. And some people will probably opt out, and that's fine. So I think that's interesting. So yeah, I think so for the last couple of years, I've really reeled in the adult bit a bit, and largely the reason why I'd consider it still to be an adult show is just, I swear there's bad language in the show. I can't stop other people from swearing, that kind of thing. But yeah, I think when I go back to Edinburgh next year, I'm going to do a sort of late night, probably 10, 11 o'clock type gig, and go wheel out a lot of the old stuff, but sort of like snazz it up a bit.
Yeah. Fraser Penman says, quick question. I've always shied away from adult, as I feel it would prevent me from doing corporate. Do you feel it restricts, or is it just hearsay? I
think it's fine. Yeah, I think it's fine. I mean, on my website, when you go to like the page, I haven't looked at it for ages, but I think when you go to my website and look at the page about booking the show, yeah, so that it's literally divided in two, and this is so out of date now, but like it basically just has, because I never update it, but on the left it's squeaky clean, on the right it's naughty, and it just says, look, you decide what you're organizing for. If you're organizing stuff that that is going to be a problem, then we'll. And you know, when I talk to corporates on the phone or have a call with them about what they want to do, I'll always raise it and say, look, who are your crowd? And some audiences, like, I mean, one of the best and busiest acts on the corporate circuit, not a hypnotist, is Bobby Davro, and they don't get a lot bluer than Bobby Davro. I mean, he's a phenomenal act, but like, to book him, if you can see him do a corporate gig, tears the room to pieces. But it's about as rude as it gets.
Yeah.
So there are, I think, more and more, it depends what you're going to do. Like I said, I really pick and choose my corporate stuff. It really depends what you're going to do. Generally speaking, I'm finding that corporates are not that worried. As long as somebody's not going to not show up for work on Monday,
Yeah,
then they're sort of generally all right with it.
I recently did one in London with a very well-known comedian who is very, very, very blue. From up your neck of the woods as well, actually, but not that one.
Not that one. Yeah,
not that one. His wife's a famous comedian as well. So, and yeah, they've come through and the client is like, oh, because it's this, and this, it's, you know, you can't say anything that's this, you can't say anything that's that, you can't say anything. And he's literally just looked at them and gone, have you not seen my show?
yeah.
Do you know what I mean? He says, why have you booked me for this? I mean, he went out there and smashed it. Do you know what I mean? Of course he was going to smash it.
Yeah.
But it is, I think sometimes the booker can be a bit nervous and the audience can be fantastic. So yeah.
Yeah. And, you know, I always say that I'm always prepared to switch gear at any moment. It's not like I'm an illusionist with all the props and I've only brought the clean squeaky props. I've left the rude ones. Like, it's not like we've got to like get everything back in the van. It's largely in my head and I don't unpack and pack my box with props and stuff. So I've got everything. And so a lot of the time they're sort of happy to sort of trust me to like gear the show. And you'll have seen this as well, to sort of gear the show as we go.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you've got to. So one of the great things about being a hypnotist is you've got to be flexible in how things work. So yes, thank you for joining us this week. It's been great to have you on again. As you know, I mean, it's again what you're doing with stage hypnosis, because the more people see theatre shows and see stage hypnosis where it should be on a stage, the better it is for everybody. So yeah, absolutely fantastic.
Thank you, mate.
Yeah. Anything you want to plug? Any trainings coming up? Any shows coming up? Anything you want to plug at all?
No, nothing really. Keep an eye on my Instagram, Robert Temple Hypnotist. I post tour stuff on there all the time. If you go to roberttemplehypnotist.com, you can see the current advertised tour dates for next year. Somewhere, I don't know the exact date, somewhere around end of November, we'll be launching most of next year's dates.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Robert, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on. Thank you very much for joining us. And guys, thank you for joining us as well. Please put the applause emoji in the comment section. Check out Robert's social medias as well, and make sure you get tickets to that show. Because if you're a stage hypnotist in the UK watching this and you've not seen Robert's show, then you're doing yourself a disservice. Buy tickets for shows, support it, because if Robert's working in your town, there's a good chance that bookers in that area will be looking to book a show afterwards as well. So definitely support that as well. He always says Instagram stories are great. Jeff says thanks. Roy Miller's putting the applause up there. Guys, do show that love. Robert, thank you very much for joining us this week.
Thank you, mate.
It's been a real pleasure. Take care.